Forslag var å undersøke om det noen som ikke snakker norsk eller skandinavisk her.
Ask this question in English.
Det denne måten man får testa det på. Anyone not speaking Norwegian or Scandinavian here? One person. Excellent. Would you like to try to do it in Norwegian? No. Okay, this is quite a dynamic situation, so I mean, I'll probably leave it to you guys.
Yeah, I'll leave it to you, Finn.
No, let's do it in English to include everyone.
What I'll do, just introduce you. Finn Iunker is currently a research fellow at Teaterskolen, KIO, and at Teaterskolen, writer, and also quite active in the public sphere, I would say. Trond Lossius, I assume you all know from before and also from previous presentations here. So please.
So this is a conversation that we've been talking about having for very, very long. I think since before I started here, we had the idea of it, and then it's just taken very long to find a time for it. So it's really nice to do this at last. And I also have to say that no, we've not met beforehand and made a plan for what we are to say today. We probably sort of like have some ideas about things to talk about, both of us. But this will be like a conversation in the real sense that we just start somewhere and see where it goes. So my first question for you, Finn, would be, you're currently a research fellow, and I'm curious about when you applied or when you started as a research fellow, what did your project look like back then?
Thank you. My first question would be, is John Andrew here? Are you going to record it?
Yes.
It's okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you want, you could leave the recorder on the table here so you get the sound closer. Yeah, let's do that. Thank you. Less reverb. It's probably enough anyway.
Turn the mic down.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
The project, do you hear me okay? Yeah. The project started as a wish to write for theater in a political way, including a wish to make theater accessible for blind people and people with disability. What's it called? Sehbehindert. Visually impaired.
Yeah.
Visually impaired. Yeah. And it has been and it is a project which is very much alive in the sense that new ideas come into the project and other ideas go out of the project in a process that I would call aesthetic Darwinism, in the sense that there are many ideas, but I don't know exactly which ideas will be fit for survival.
And I saw, I mean, from your project, I mean, I was reading the project description that you were applying to with, where you said talking about repoliticizing the theater or arts in general. So is this kind of like, I mean, when you were concerned with this at that point, was it because it was sort of like, you know, a new step, a new phase, a new like a new interest or urge in your practice that you needed to dive into that motivated this at the time? Or is it something that you had worked on from beforehand as well?
It was a new approach, but it being a new approach was nothing new in itself. I'm used to going into new areas, and I'm fond of doing it. So that in itself was not new, but and the approach to a more political theater was also in itself not entirely new. But I felt a need to distance myself from what I would call traditional political art, in the sense that I don't enjoy art which is too much based on stereotypes about the society, like being against I don't know, typical left-wing politics. I'm more in the middle myself politically, but I think at the beginning I was more against existing forms of political theater, and now I'm less against other things and more in favor of my own things as they come into existence.
But it also seemed to me, I mean, from that project description, because you're saying that going back in time to, for instance, Krog, the artist played an important role as a political voice or political activator, kind of activator of discussions in society, and that you say that currently this role has been taken over by others like journalists, researchers, specialists. So there's also this kind of, seemed to me to be this urge of finding a voice that somehow can be louder in society as an artist? Yes.
In order for me to analyze the phenomenon, I needed to take a step back and look at existing forms of political art, and I found it very one-sided and not really informed. You can be against capitalism, but few of those will be willing to study economics, for instance, let's say. And also by the point that practical political thinking in society is done more elaborately by journalists and researchers, and then with the postmodern wave, it also came into existence this very strange view that everything is political, even if it's just two words playing against each other. So I felt the need to break out of that, and it was less a redefining of political theater than it was redefining of my view on what is political theater, what is political literature, what is political art.
Or what it is to you, what it can be to you.
Yeah.
And I mean, one thing that struck me when I saw the kind of projects that you were proposing, I mean, one of them was developing a theater for the blind and visually impaired. I mean, to me, that seems to be political in a different sense than being political through its content, but being political through how it's working more, and who is working for, who it is, including.
It's political also in content, in the sense that presenting art for the visually impaired also stresses the need to make art more accessible to the visually impaired. So it thematizes the political actionism, if you will. And it was it also began as a typical idea of mine to, theater for the blind, that's impossible, haha, I want to make it. make something that doesn't yet exist. But I find it. Then came the political idea to make. There are the visually impaired, and we should perhaps make theatre for them. Then came the very important recognition of the fact that I didn't want to make theatre for the visually impaired. I wanted to make theatre for everyone, included the visually impaired, and in principle, including the audibly impaired also.
Because somehow when I was reading it, it was reminding me about this project that Tarek Atui was doing in Bergen in 2016 as part of the Bergen Assembly within which, and that's been a research that he's been doing for years, which is about creating music or a musical practice, inviting musical practice for the non-hearing or the ones with a reduced hearing, and which is, you know, he's using deep frequencies that you can feel them through your body. But I think no more than anything, what he's doing is really creating a social situation that is very inclusive and embracing, and where I think at the end of it, like the sound of it is the least important thing. It's just like a vehicle for creating a certain kind of like social situation. Could you see yourself working in those kind of directions? Because I mean, it seems from what I've received from you so far is still texts.
Yes. First of all, the wish to make theatre accessible for the visually impaired also led me to a new approach to set design, if you like. So, a good advice if you invite a poor-sighted person to dinner is to use contrasts at the table. So not use a white plate and white sheets and white napkins, but use contrasts. And if you transport that knowledge into set design, you can achieve, I think, some interesting new set design in over thematizing the use of colors. Also, apart from the fact that you need this for practical purposes. So you turn what is referred to as chromophobia, the anxiety about using colors, into chromophilia in a new way. But it turned out that my idea was too much linked to, I think it's an idea for set design and not an idea for me being a writer. But I still took a lot of those thoughts into my writing, in the sense that I want to write in a clear, simple way, to include, to make my thoughts accessible to more people. This is seen sometimes as necessarily leading to a conflating of the ideas themselves, but I believe, on the other hand, that trying to see clearly what you are actually doing will help not only yourself but also the audience in taking parts of those ideas or those products, as the text is also for me.
This I want to come back to later on as well. But reading it, reading your project description, I also found that you said that you wanted to sort of expose and exhibit your process during these 3 years, and you were suggesting making a blog, and you'd made like a prototype of this blog, I think, for the application. So I looked up the link and only found 2 blog posts. And I think like the second one is really interesting, so I'm just going to read this one.
Okay.
This is a Norwegian, so maybe I'll try to translate it to English. And this is from December 2015, so it's probably just like a few months into having started, right? So you said that the project has started, but already now it's clear that the project description will not be covering what I actually will be doing. First of all, the idea
that
of...
sounds like a true statement, at least.
Yeah. First of all, the idea of a modern version of Vevana, about international textile industry, or the substance or the curiosity or your curiosity that is needed for this project to develop, and kind of like becomes a final program. Is sort of like lacking, it seems like, and then it also turns out that the idea number 2 to write a work for blind, a kind of adventure, went enough thought through, and then you say what you said now also, that the idea is not that you write something for the blind, but something that is also accessible to the blind, and why should blind go to theater and like not see a piece about blind, and the third thing is that you'd never taken in the research aspect of all of it. More about this later. It's now later. I mean, that third thing makes me curious.
It's written in white. It says, I will talk about this on the 25th of January 2018, which is today, actually. Yes, it's correct. The thought process. I think the project in itself has resulted in 2 main text sub-projects. One is a play on Palestine, which so far has resulted in a book which I see on your table, Stemme fra Israel, Voices from Israel, and the other is a libretto titled Walter Benjamin's Død I Portbou, which you also have.
Yes.
There's a question always lurking behind the scene. And have you read all these books, sir? The Palestine text project has its research element in the wish to write about important events in a clear and plain language. I think that, and I will try to present this as a contribution to the art of writing dialogue or writing lines for a play, because I think that lines could work better if they were written with a sense of traditional style. Let's say the advice, omit needless words, for example. The Benjamin project, which is ongoing, and which is now basically a cooperation between me as a writer and John Andrew Wilhite, sitting there as a composer and musician. its research aspect is the research itself. So I spent 3 or 4 or 5 months, I don't know, researching what was happening to Walter Benjamin when he died in Portbou, and trying to get ahead of existing research, Benjamin research, because what I see around me is often artists who are good at making sound or pictures or theater. They do not have their own view on their material from a research point of view.
You mean they're just adapting facts without doing fact checking of it? Is that what you're thinking of?
Yeah, more or less. To really explore existing research material. I'm writing now a small libretto on Walter Benjamin's passport and his and how he was trying to obtain a new passport with the aid of his ex-wife, who was then living in Sanremo in 1938, approximately 1 year before he was decitizenized or ausgebürgert from Germany. Yeah. Those are the 2 main strands in my project from a research point of view. And the third one is overarching in the sense that I would like to make a lecture or write an article about the use, or rather abuse, of academic jargon in the field of artistic research.
Yeah, I've had early warnings of that one.
Yes.
So, but I'm curious with because I mean, when I first received this book, and I think I received the script before it was published, and it's a really heavy book to read. I mean, it's one to read slowly, because after a few pages, I can't take more. And I thought kind of like talking about this is like talking about the whole complex of what's going on there, and basically like any kind of situation throughout mankind where you have different tribes that where one is oppressing the other one. So when I was mailing to you at some point and asking you kind of what your plans were for your research fellowship, I was really surprised about when you said that the reflection on this book would be about form, because I would kind of like expect that with this heavy political topic, it's kind of like impossible to not escape it. It's impossible to talk about anything else than what's burning in the book. So I'm very curious about it, because these texts are based on testimonies by Israeli soldiers that are themselves published, and then you've used that as a raw material for this book. Could you say something about how you worked on it, and like the process of going from that text that you use as the basis of it to your own book?
Yeah, the testimonies present, or they try to present one event or one string of events which happened at one location at one particular year. From a soldier belonging to one particular unit of the occupation forces, and I have tried to take out. I have tried to make it simpler and stronger through simplicity, by taking out details that didn't really belong to the story, and making it more making it more clear who is talking. When we talk naturally, we use I, you, we in a sort of mix, which is, but it becomes, the language becomes clearer if you decide that all the time I will use the word I or you, or when you enter a village, or when we enter a village, we will do this and this and that. Mm. And through this process, without altering any of the facts, or and in keeping with the spirit of the testimonies, which was my, and which is my arrangement with this organization, Breaking the Silence, I tried to condense the stories, the testimonies, or just making them clearer. Mm. And in this process, I can take one example. It was they talk about there's a Jewish festival or holiday called Purim, in which Jewish children run around in the streets making a lot of noise. And it was said among the soldiers in one unit that, oh, let's give them a good Purim, which means that they go into a village and throw around stun grenades and shoot in the air to wake people up, just for fun. And I will try to...
It's quite early on, as far as I remember.
Is it?
Yeah, I don't know.
Why do you say it's early if you don't know?
While you're looking for it, I have to say that that's kind of one of the things that have been interesting for me by getting to know Finn, is that it's a continuous challenge to my own language, which is probably not at the same level, but I have to say it's very difficult for me now to write an email without going through it a few times and removing words.
Yes.
So, but just to finish off, because I know there's a debate going on with some of the critiques that you've been writing, because you kind of like you have a certain goal, you have a certain aesthetic, you have a certain demand for the language that you work with yourself, because you want to achieve certain kind of things. But then I also read recently this review that you did of Sunda, I think. I've never read his books. I have to do them now, and then we can talk again afterwards. But it seemed to me that you also try to apply your way of thinking to everyone else, and for me, reading that review, it just seems that he is working on a completely different project in one way, trying to, he's trying to get to where language can't get, so that his language is somehow just bound to fail. But it's in the failing he starts talking about what he really wants to talk to. So, I mean, how universally applicable do you see your approach, or are you really using like the review of others as a way of positioning yourself? Because I think that's very much the way I read your critiques of reviews.
Yeah, it's partly positioning myself, but also to try to test my own thoughts about something by testing them on others. And it's always fun to strip people in high places naked. It's not fun seeing them naked, but it's fun to strip them naked. And I've been attacked for this critique of Ole Robert Sunde, which you can read at Vagant
And it was also published in Morgenbladet, I think, wasn't it?
My essay was published in Morgenbladet,
yes.
and the attack on me was published yesterday at vagant.no. I think it's always fun to be the to bully a bit those at the top places, and to explore the possibility, at least, that those who are seen as geniuses do not necessarily have any visible sign of taste or intelligence at all. But returning to the text that I was trying to find in Stemme fra Israel, the thing about the Purim was that the soldiers react if someone in the village throws a stone, then they go out at night throwing stun grenades, waking up the whole village. The question for me becomes, how should I arrange those two events? The throwing of a stone at daytime, probably, and waking up all the village at night. Should I say we wake them up at night if they throw a stone, or should I say if they throw a stone, then we wake them up at night? It's a technical question, but with not that easy and reply, in the sense that there are things that may be better for presenting the cause before the effect. But normally we recognize the structure and the content of a sentence easier if we see it in a chronological structure. First something happens, then as a consequence something else happens.
All right. I think we're running out of time, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Since we're running into lunch, we have time for one or two questions before we finish the session. So.
Okay.
Nobody really dares read Finland. No. That's the thing. Okay, then I'm going to put focus on. Thank you very much. Let's put your hands together for this session. I'm just going to put focus on the next session, session 8, which is called Thematics, which starts at 2 p.m. Karen Diesen and Hanne Rige have a thematic session called Attention Training. Trine Wester will have a drawing session in the reception gallery. Karl Lange will present Phonotope at stage 6, and then at 3:10, Trond Lossius and Kjøtta will have a presentation about the project program, which will be in English for KIO staff. Okay, have a good lunch.